Hello, welcome to more yoga with me, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're doing well. And if not, that this will really be a super relaxing, almost restorative practice for you. I feel like I need it. I'm burnt out. It's the end of summer. So here's my offering for you. For today, get as many props as you can. Blocks, chip foam block, two pillows maybe if you have them, some rolled up blankets. If you have a yoga bolster, then grab a yoga bolster and pause the video. You can go run and grab your stuff if you need to. And then come on back right away. We're going to start with a really, hopefully, nice pose called supported fish. So I usually like to set the props up something like this, but then with the pillows on top to make it extra comfy. And then the idea is that eventually you're going to lie back on all of this. So get your bum as close in to the props as you can, and then gently lie back. Now, if the props fall, they fall. It's not a big deal. From here, maybe you're feeling this really nice elevated position. You could wrap your shoulder blades toward each other a little bit more. Some people like to have their legs extended. Maybe it feels better to have your knees bent, particularly if your low back is tight. Maybe butterfly, although we will be going there later. So wherever you need to go. And then you could take a few snow angels with your arms just to see if there's a position that feels even better across the chest. And then for 3 breaths, inhale through the nose. And exhale, sigh your breath away. 2 more. And then continue breathing however feels best for you, whether it's in and out through your nose or your mouth. But really start to draw your focus to your breath. Notice how it's flowing. Maybe it feels a little bit more open, a little bit more spacious in this position. It might not. That's fine and normal too. But really breathe into the opening that you're creating in the chest. So it might not mean belly breaths. It might mean breath a little bit higher up into the chest, so long as it doesn't feel like that triggers anything or makes you feel like you're kind of panic breathing. Then just breathe however you need to breathe. We'll be here a little bit longer than we normally would be at the start of a class. Just because, well, hopefully this feels like a really nice opening for you. Last few breaths here. And then slowly start to bring a little bit of movement back into your body. Stay here longer if you want to, or you can always pause the video. And then maybe take a little rock of your head from side to side or any sort of yawning stretch that would feel good. When you're ready, bend your knees and roll over to one side. You might bring a pillow with you to bring underneath your head and pause here for a couple breaths. And then moving as little as possible, remove any other props out from underneath of you, which if you were like me, you're doing full on Princess and the Pea, there might be a few things to remove, and that's okay. And then roll back onto your back so that you find a neutral spine for a few breaths. And then draw your knees toward your chest and take a little rock from side to side. You might draw your knees a little bit closer toward you, see how that feels on your back. Maybe let the knees drift away from you a little bit more. Maybe even arm's length away. Massage more out, or massage out, rather, the pelvis a little bit more. And then pause back in center, keeping your knees bent. Bring your feet to the floor, and we'll move into a figure four stretch. So cross the right ankle over top of the left thigh. So you don't want to go all the way across, right? The more you're able to keep your foot kind of more or less running parallel with your femur, the better. You might stay here. You might deepen the stretch. You could bring a block underneath the left foot, or maybe you start to draw your legs toward you. I really like not using my hands for the first few breaths, rather just using the muscles of my core, and I can rock a little bit from side to side, and it really helps me find a bit more mobility, a little bit more space. By all means, if you would like to, you might choose to bind behind that left thigh and draw the legs toward you a little bit more. But if by reaching for the thigh it means that your head is lifted and you've got lots of tension through the neck and shoulders, then just don't bother. You could gently hold on to one knee and you might draw the right thigh toward you, or you might play with pressing it away from you. And just see if there's a position that doesn't feel just a little bit more interesting for you. Last two breaths here. And then slowly come back to center. Keep your right foot crossed over top. Bring your left foot down to the floor and then cross your right thigh over top of the left. So now the legs are crossed rather than just the ankle. Right, as deep or as shallow of a cross as feels good. And then shift your hips a little bit to the right. Bring your right arm out to the side. And then as you exhale, lower your knees to the left. So a cross leg twist can be really deep. So you've got lots of props today. Maybe you bring a pillow or a block underneath your knees. Super normal for your right shoulder blade to be drifting off the floor here. In fact, I don't think I know anyone who can have their knees and their shoulder blade on the earth at the same time. And that's not a challenge. You don't need to prove me wrong on this, right? Just go where it feels best on your body. Often with cross-legged twist, we kind of like grip and almost fight against the twist. So if you notice that you're doing that, back out of it. Prop a little bit higher underneath you so that you can be at ease here. Last breath here. Awesome. And then slowly inhale, come back to center, uncross your legs, shake them out a little bit, reset your pelvis and spine. And then when you're ready, cross your left ankle over top of the right thigh. So left knee goes wide, left toes come back toward your shin. Maybe you stay here, maybe you deepen it by bringing something underneath the right foot, or maybe you draw your legs toward you. Again, you could be still, or you could take a little rock from side to side. See if there isn't, a better position for you today. And of course, if you wish to, you can interlace your hands behind that right thigh. Some people like bringing it over top of the shin. For me, I feel like that's just a bit too much tension, not enough release. Wherever you are, with your hands or your legs, just pause for a few more breaths here. One more inhale, and one sweet exhale. All right, and then slowly come back to center. Release your right foot to the floor. Cross your left thigh over top of the right. And then maybe you shift your hips a little bit to the left. Left arm goes out to the side. And then exhale, lower your knees to the right. Again, this is a really great place to bring a block or a pillow underneath your knees, so that while this twisted leg stretch or twist, cross leg, twisted leg, and twist, it gets hard to say, can feel really deep. I want you to give yourself as much ease as you can here, as much support as feels good on your body. And I don't often give you the opportunity to just pause and to stay in a pose for a long time. And we're not here as long as you might in a yin style class. So you don't have to worry as much about overstretching the connective tissues in your body, but sometimes it's good for the brain to slow the body down as well. Last breath here. And slowly inhale. Come back to center. Unwind your legs. Reset your pelvis and spine. Shake it out a little bit. And then if you have a block, let's bring it underneath your pelvis. A pillow works really well too. You don't have to be lifted up super high. I'm going to be using my block on its lowest sort of setting or lowest height here. And you want the prop underneath your hips rather than underneath the low back. So your low back should feel relatively free here. And then start to extend your legs away from you. Now you might keep the knees bent a little bit, you might extend them all the way, but the idea is now that your hips are going to be the highest part of your body, or the lifted away from the floor. Now this can feel quite intense, so if you need to go down to something a little bit lower, even a chip foam block with like 1.5 or 2 inches of height can feel like a really great release here, particularly if you feel like this is just kind of too much on your low back. Then by all means lower down a little bit. But hopefully what you're feeling now is a release through the hip flexors. And this can be, I was about to say this can be, depending on your body, a really fantastic way to release through the hip flexors without having to do any activity, right? Without having to do lots of lunges, which are great for getting deep targeted stretches on the hip flexors. But it takes work. It takes activation. Whereas here, in theory, at least, you can be completely relaxed. I've heard this pose referred to as sky bridge before, and I kind of like that image. You're floating in the sky. Last few breaths here. And then slowly start to bend your knees. And then heel and toe the feet in towards you slightly. And then you're going to draw your knees toward you. Now, if you're with me on a cork block, this can get quite diggy into the pelvis and the bones, right? So you might want something a bit more squishy, like a pillow or even a pillow on top of a block. But eventually you're going to draw your knees toward you. And the theory is that with the hips lifted off the earth like this, whether you're on a block or a pillow, it should mean that your knees drape toward you quite a bit more easily so that you don't necessarily have to interlace your hands or cross the shins or draw your legs toward you. In theory, anyway, gravity should be doing that for you. Now, you all have different shapes and sizes of bodies and different heights that we've lifted the pelvis up. So, of course, if you want to interlace your hands over top your shins, you can, and it will deepen the compression on the belly, but will help also deepen the release through the low back. This is called supported snail, and it is one of the best releases that I know of for the low back. So long as you can be comfortable here, right? So a few more breaths here. One more inhale. One sweet exhale. All right, from here, start to reach your legs up to the sky. Now, at any point, if you need to change the position of the block underneath you, then go ahead and change it. And again, with the lift of the pelvis here, it might be easier to have your knees straight. You don't have to have them straight. They could be deeply bent here, even so. But the idea is that we're reaching the legs up to the sky. So it's like doing legs up the wall, except you're in the middle of the room. Some of you might reach your arms up as well. And you could point and flex through the ankles and toes. Right? You could bring movement to this if you wish, or you might just be here in a really passive sort of position. If you have a strap, and of course I forgot to get one, it can be quite a useful tool here for Viparita Karani, where you make the loop in the strap the same diameter as the outside edge of your shins, and then loop the strap over the shins so that you can just let the legs flop out and you don't have to use any muscular tension to stay here or muscular activation. So a few more breaths here. All right. And then slowly start to bend your knees. And then maybe bring one foot to the floor and then the other. You're going to stay up on the block or the pillow for one last pose. Heel and tuck your feet out wider. So maybe mat width apart. And let your knees hang in toward each other. So again, the block should be underneath your pelvis or your bum here. And this is doesn't feel like much, but if you have low back tension or SI joint tension, this is one of the best things that you can do for your body. That little bit of lift just generates more force through gravity on the pelvis, and it helps reset everything, particularly with yoga because we do so many single leg things, right? Warrior one, warrior two, you know, versus double leg things like a squat. So all of those single leg things can kind of shift the pelvis out of position a little bit. This is a really, really great way to bring it back into neutral. So last few breaths here. And then slowly start to heel into your feet back underneath your knees. So nice neutral position. And then press into your feet to lift your pelvis up and away from the block or the pillow. And then lower it back down onto the floor for a few breaths. With a neutral spine, you might take your feet out wide again and let your knees hang in toward each other. You might feel like you're falling through the earth a little bit. All right, I promised you supine butterfly, so here we go. Great place to have lots of props, pillows or blocks. Heel and toe your feet together now, so the soles of the feet touch, and then let your knees go out wide. So I get it. This might not feel super awesome. So if you have your pillows or your props, your blocks, you can bring them underneath your thighs at whatever height along the way so that you really can just take the excess tension out of the adductors, out of the groin, so that you can be here with ease. I know some of you might not want to use any props at all, and that's fine. For me, I find that gets just a little bit too tight into the low back. So I just bring a little bit of lift underneath my thighs, and that helps remove that lower back tension as well as excess tension through the groin. You might rest your palms on your belly or your thighs, or maybe take your arms out wide. So a few breaths here now in supine butterfly. You're really getting a lot of hip releases today without ever really having to move, right? We haven't even sat up, let alone stood up. And of course, this isn't necessarily the way you want to stretch every day, but it can be so calming for the nervous system and for your body to take the time to move slowly and to pause in stillness. Last few breaths here. Now to get out of butterfly, you can use your hands on your thighs to draw the legs toward each other, or I find the easiest way for me is to start to heel until the feet out wide, and then the legs, the thighs will naturally lift towards each other. And extend your legs out on the floor for a few breaths, just again coming back to that neutral spine, neutral body position. We're going to do one little chest opener before we make our way into our final resting pose. And then to start, you're going to bring your hands underneath your bum, palms facing down. So there's that little bit of lift through the hips, and extend your legs toward you, or sorry, away from you, but peel your toes back toward you. So heels press away, toes peel back toward you. A little draw of belly button to spine. This might be enough for you. Just that little bit of activation. If you would like to, press into the elbows, maybe walk them toward each other a little bit, and come up to kingfish pose. You can tuck the chin, keep the back of the neck long if you wish, or maybe you start to lift the chest up a touch, keep the back of the neck long, or I almost never offer this, allow the chin to lift enough that maybe the crown of the head starts to reach toward the floor, right? Your head could be totally hovering off the earth, Maybe the crown of the head comes to the floor. Last couple breaths. And then if your head is all the way back, tuck the chin and then take your elbows a little bit wider so that you can come down to the earth. Remove your hands out from underneath your bum and take a little windshield wiper of your knees here. Now, if there's anything else you feel like you need before your final resting pose, a posture or meditation, please feel free to take it. Otherwise, my offering for you today for your final resting pose is to bring blocks or pillows behind your knees as you lie back on the floor. You might bring a pillow underneath your head or even underneath your back to give yourself that little bit of extra lift here. But really, it's all about that little lift behind the knees, which can feel so wonderful, right? It releases tension on the low back. I like to call it yoga lazy boy. And then wherever you are, if this isn't where you want to be, maybe you choose to rest on your side or child's pose or a seated meditation. But take your time to find a pose that can feel really restful. And then once you've found your pose of rest for 3 breaths, inhale through your nose. And exhale, sigh your breath away. 2 more, just like that. And then let go of your breath control. Return to your natural breath, slow and sweet. Let go of any last muscle gripping or tension. Maybe it's in the neck or the jaw or the hips. So that with each exhale, your body can melt a little bit deeper into the earth. And thoughts may come and go. Acknowledge them without judgment, but let them go. Let them drift by you like leaves on the wind. And then take a moment to thank yourself for coming here today, for giving yourself this time to really slow down and to restore your body and your nervous system. Please stay here longer if you can, 5, 10, 15 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.